Welcome everyone to New York City. Today we're going to explore the anniversary of Washington's inauguration.
Hi, I'm Mrs. Q, and we are standing right here in New York City on the spot where 232 years ago today, at exactly this time, the first president ever in the history of the United States of America was inaugurated, George Washington. And that happened right there where the statue is that you see behind me. So we're going to spend some time today talking about what was it like right here in 1789 when that event took place, who was here, what kind of happenings were going on, and then we're going to reenact the nation's first ever inaugural parade as we go up the Broadway to St. Paul's Chapel, where the very first inaugural service was held. Be sure to ask us your questions, even if you have questions about what I'm wearing, because you see, I am not dressed in a day dress today. I am dressed for the inaugural ball. So this isn't what the ladies would have been wearing in the afternoon, but this is what the ladies would have been wearing for the party later that evening. And be sure to stay with us for our whole walk, because there are going to be some special guests joining us along the way.
Ooh, I'm so excited for that. So I'm joined by Karen Quiñones, who is Mrs. Q today. You're a tour guide. You give people awesome perspectives of Revolutionary War history.
And I even dress up to get people interested.
Yes, exactly. That's the cool thing. Tell us just a one-liner. Who is Mrs. Q?
Mrs. Q is a lady merchant in Revolutionary War, New York City.
Fascinating. And today, the special day is George Washington's inauguration.
It is.
So he's our first U.S. president.
Our very first president, very first time the oath of office was ever recited in our nation's history.
What year?
1789.
Ooh, wonderful. All right, let's walk around.
Right here.
We're starting right now. Let's situate everyone where we're located.
So we are at Wall Street and Broad Street.
Yeah.
And right up there is Trinity Church, and we'll be talking about that in a little while. Over here is Federal Hall, and this is where the event took place. Now, it wasn't this building. This is a newer building. It was a different building here at the time, but the statue represents the spot where Washington stood when he put his hand on the Bible and recited the oath of the presidency. Now, to understand what was going on that day, think about it. It was way back in 1775, 14 years before that the Revolutionary War started.
Oh,
it's 14 long years, right? So we've now been through the war, we've written and ratified our Constitution, and we have unanimously elected our first president. And I just thought, I'm wondering if anyone out there knows who was the vice president who was sworn in that day. So let's see if anyone can tell us who the vice president was who was sworn in that day.
Oh, yeah.
He is going to go on to be president himself, and there were two other gentlemen here that day who will also go on to be president, and I wonder if anyone knows who they were. And I'll give you a hint, one of them was not Alexander Hamilton. Although he was here, he never was the president. And another, of course, was Aaron Burr, who also was not the president.
Right.
And John Jay, who was the first Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. Now, there were some very unique things about that first inauguration, and one of those unique things is we're used to the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court swearing in the president.
Right.
Well, there was no Supreme Court yet. As George Washington, there was no president to create a court. So he was sworn in by a gentleman named Robert Livingston, who was the highest ranking justice in the state of New York at that time. So that makes the inauguration unique. It's also unique in that he was unanimously selected by every one of the electors in the Electoral College, and we know that doesn't happen anymore.
So he was a popular guy.
Yeah, so it's a very unique thing. Plus, it's the first time, so that makes it unique as well. Now, to the right of Federal Hall was someone's home, and the people in that home were all standing out on their balcony, and the daughter, who was about 15,
it's raining on George Washington's inauguration. Yeah, let's go underneath.
Let's go under here.
Poor George Washington. He had to. Was it what? How was the weather?
I think it was a beautiful day that day.
Okay.
Woo.
So it set the right precedent.
Yes. beautiful day, and it was crowded. So at the house on the right, they were standing out on the balcony, and the 15-year-old daughter said it was so crowded that it looked like she could step off of her balcony and walk across the heads of the people gathered here. You couldn't find a room to lease in New York for 10 miles. It was so packed. I mean, imagine it, the very first presidential inauguration, people came from all over the new United States of America, plus there were delegations here from other countries. There was a Spanish delegation, a French delegation, a Dutch delegation, and missing was an English delegation. I wonder why, but many other countries sent delegations here to honor that first presidential inauguration.
And Marianne says, was James Madison one of the gentlemen?
Absolutely, he was. He will be president one day.
And he's probably the least known of the three you mentioned.
And another one is a Virginian.
Is it Thomas Jefferson?
It is Thomas Jefferson. Yeah. Has anybody guessed who the vice president was yet?
I think a few people have already guessed. Of course, it was John Adams.
It was John Adams, right? So we had to have some balance, didn't we? Since Washington was from Virginia, from the Old South, we had to have a little balance. So John Adams is from New England, and that gives us a little balance in the executive branch, which we still kind of try to do today. So they were very concerned with the New Englanders not being offended by the first president being a Virginian, and they wanted some political balance at that time. So these two gentlemen served. But you might note, you mentioned that subsequent presidents are going to be James Madison and Thomas Jefferson. Out of the first 4 presidents, 3 were Virginians. So that gives you an idea of Virginia's influence on that early presidency, of much concern to the people of New England at that time.
Which ironically wasn't the biggest city. Not even New York was the biggest city. It was Philly or Boston
right,
at the time.
Right. Yeah. New York by 1789 is growing rapidly. Right. Growing rapidly after the war. But as we walk a little bit, we're going to talk about that New York was most of it destroyed in the war. More than a quarter of the city was destroyed by a massive fire in 1776. And by the inauguration, the city had not yet been rebuilt. So that beautiful Trinity Church that we see up there today is a later church. At the time of Washington's inauguration, there was just a burnt out ruin there. So we'll talk a little bit more about that.
Let's walk that way.
So at 2 o'clock, Washington came out onto the balcony. All the gentlemen were there with him. They got out a Bible, and by the way, can you believe they planned everything that day so perfectly? Washington's parade from his home to here, who would march in what order, who would speak in what order, every little thing, and they forgot a Bible. And at the last minute, they had to run out to get a Bible, and the nearest one was around the corner at the Freemasons Lodge, St. John's Lodge. And that Bible still exists today, and it is on display in Federal Hall. When they reopen, you can see it in there.
Oh, fascinating.
So that same Bible still exists. So they pulled out the Bible, Washington put his hand on the Bible, of course. He took the 43 words of the oath of office, the very short oath, the same one presidents still take today. And then Robert R. Livingston said, "Long live President George Washington of the United States of America." And a massive crowd here broke out in cheers and celebration. Now, this is New York, right?
Yeah.
And Washington had already been here for a week, and there had been celebrations nonstop for the prior week, dinners and balls and parties. And it was amazing that Mr. Washington was, conscious enough to even come out here that day and take the oath of office, that he wasn't tired from all of the parties.
Right.
I should also note something very important about that inauguration. Washington wore an American-made suit, as did Vice President Adams. And the reason they wore those American suits was to display to the world that this new nation would be as great and as capable as any nation that already existed. And so the fabric was a fine brown fabric, and this was a indication of their faith in the future of America. Now, there was a rumor around New York, and some of you may have heard of this gentleman, Hercules Mulligan.
Yes.
There was a rumor
famous
around.
Rapper.
Yes. There was a
Just
rumor.
kidding. Taylor.
A tailor.
Yeah.
There was a rumor around New York that presidential suit was actually made by Hercules Mulligan's Tailor Emporium.
Oh, fascinating.
Now, no one knows if Mulligan really made that suit or if it was just Mulligan's great marketing talent at work. But as a result, Mulligan became the most popular tailor in New York during that presidency and became a very wealthy gentleman. So we don't know if he really made the suits.
Right. Cauliflower leaves the super chat and says that you're her favorite historian.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
And one thing before we start walking, I heard that a lot of people couldn't hear.
No, almost no one could hear. The young lady I spoke of who was standing on the balcony, she said she was barely able to hear him, that he spoke in such a soft voice. So down here, I doubt anyone really heard him, but once Chancellor Livingston yelled out, "Long live President George Washington," I guess they figured the oath had been taken and they could all cheer now.
And John Adams was noted to be sweating and very nervous.
John Adams was very nervous, and someone noted, you know, when Washington arrived, they had a big parade from his house, which was where the Brooklyn Bridge is today. And they had a big formal parade that brought him down here, and the soldiers lined the streets so that he could walk in. John Adams' job was to greet him and take him to his place in the Senate chamber. And Adams, someone who didn't like Adams very much, said that Adams was so distracted by his own role and importance in events that he nearly forgot to greet the president-elect when he arrived. So little anti-Adams sentiment there. Yes.
All right, so lead the way.
So let's go. So it was determined that after the inauguration, after the swearing in, that there would be an inaugural parade and a service. Now, Washington was an Anglican, and normally he would have been sworn in the Church of England, or the former Church of England, Trinity Church. Now,
was there an Episcopal church at that time?
Yes,
okay.
And you might remember, some of you, that before the American Revolution, the Episcopal Church in America was a part of the Church of England. After the American Revolution, they said goodbye, right, to the king, and they became the Episcopal Church of New York.
Right.
So that service normally would have been at Trinity Church. So let's walk up to Trinity Church.
Ooh, so excited.
And that was a very formal procession, right? There was mounted soldiers, Washington in a carriage, and Washington's aides, and Vice President Adams, and of course the wonderful Mrs. Adams, Abigail Adams, and all sorts of dignitaries, grenadiers, Scottish bagpipers, all heading up the Broadway to St. Paul's Chapel. So we're heading now up Wall Street to Trinity Church. This Trinity Church was built in 1846, so that's more than 50 years after the inauguration.
So and this is the third version.
This is the third church. I'm sure you know, Ariel, that the first one burned in the war.
Right.
The second one collapsed in a snowstorm. And this is the third church, a beautiful Gothic revivalist cathedral. But the graveyard we find here is the original colonial graveyard, which you and I have walked through.
Yes. We did a very in-depth tour, so check that out after this video. And if you want to learn more about Mrs. Q's dress, there's a video going to be posted on her channel.
I will be posting it on my YouTube channel, Patriot Tours NYC, a video of all of the construction of this gown, from selecting the fabric to the final fitting.
Oh, fascinating.
And how I made it.
And hello, Alexandra. Hello, Gary.
Hello,
Aya.
everyone.
Hello, Claire. Do let us know where you're watching from, and let us know if you have any questions whatsoever about George Washington's inauguration, when he became the first U.S. president of America.
It's so great to see everyone.
Alexandra, yep, you're right. She made it herself. Cauliflower says, everyone hit that like button. Yes, hit that like button like George Washington.
Yes.
Hit a home run with this new government.
Happy Inauguration Day, Mrs. Q.
Thank you.
You're quite famous in these parts.
Mrs. Q, well, you know, I am a very successful merchant. Many people in the town, particularly the ladies, shop in my store for their fabrics, for their dresses.
Did you know Eliza Jumel?
Eliza Jumel, no, but Eliza Schuyler Hamilton.
Oh, you did know the other
Yes.
Eliza, okay.
Who I think today's hair is, as I've seen her, even bigger than mine.
Yes, yes.
So this is Trinity Church. Let's look at these beautiful doors.
Ooh, let's do it. Very beautiful, very descriptive.
Now, this church I mentioned, built in 1846, underwent a massive reconstruction and renovation over the past 2 years, and there's still some work being done. I think the final cost was over $100 million to restore this church. They took out all of the beautiful stained glass, they took out the pews, the statuary, they sent all of it out to specialists around the world to be refurbished, and they reconstructed the church. And part of that was the cleaning and reconstruction of these beautiful bronze doors, a gift from the Astor family.
Oh, fascinating.
And it's unfortunate that the church is still closed to the public because the doors around on the left depict what we're doing today, the inaugural parade and the arrival of George Washington at St. Paul's Chapel. So since there was no Trinity Church here in 1789 for Washington to have his service, we have to walk up to St. Paul's Chapel, which you're not going to believe this because we're not going to be walking very far. St. Paul's Chapel was the country church for this church, Trinity Church.
The country church.
This was the town church, and right down there where you see the green trees of Bowling Green, that was the end of New York City.
Oh wow, that's it.
And the northern end of New York City was St. Paul's Chapel, where we're going. So if you lived down here, you came to Trinity Church, and if you lived up there in the country, you went to St. Paul's Chapel.
The Founding Fathers had a very short commute.
Very short. And we have, of course, we are at the back of the inaugural parade because we're just the citizens of the town. So we're at the back of the parade, and ahead of us are Washington and the new Congress, the new Senate, all of the gentlemen he's expecting to appoint to positions, like everyone's favorite, Mr. Alexander Hamilton, of course.
So, speaking of Hamilton, Janelle asks, was George Washington a Republican or a Democrat?
He was a Federalist.
Fascinating.
And Federalists were the gentlemen who supported ratification of the United States Constitution and the federal system it created. And that was, of course, a federal government to manage disputes between the states and foreign affairs, and the state governments pretty much left alone to govern themselves. So they were Federalists. But, you know, Mr. Madison and Mr. Jefferson were anti-Federalists.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, they did not like the way that they felt the federal government as it was created was much too powerful.
And what did they consider themselves at that time?
They would have been called Jeffersonians or Democratic Republicans, or in New York, the Federalists made up a derogatory name for them, Anti-Federalists.
Fascinating.
And who do we have here? We have some gentlemen here from the town. Let's see who they are.
Let's check it out, yeah.
He has a whole class there.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. Hello. Are you here for the inaugural parade?
Yes, we are.
I'm sure the beginning of the parade has already passed us by as we're way here in the back. Would you like to join us on our walk to St. Paul's Chapel?
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Let's do it.
Oh, it's Mr. Q. It's Mr. Q.
Oh, hey, Mr. Q. So yeah, we have an entire crew today with us.
So we can
Back in
imagine
time.
that it's 1789. The Broadway is a dirt country road. There are beautiful homes to either side of us, big trees, not at all what you'd imagine the main street of New York City to look like, but that is what it looked like. And up here we're passing the Burns Coffee House, a very popular place for people to socialize, also a popular place for the Sons of Liberty before the war.
Ah, fascinating. Those rabble-rousers.
Yes. Who are all here for the inauguration, of course, right? Because it all started with the Sons of Liberty.
Was Samuel Adams also at the inauguration?
I don't think he was. I think it was mostly just the government gentlemen and lots of New Yorkers and, you know, citizens from around the New York area. And you know, traveling was very difficult at that time.
Yes.
It took President-elect Washington, I think, 10 days to get to New York from Mount Vernon.
Oh, fascinating.
Yes. And of course, every city he stopped in had a massive celebration with him, for him, with floral triumphal arches and parades and dinners as they all celebrated the president-elect on his way to New York.
Walking LA says, leaves a super chat, loving this walk back in time. Yes, we are traveling back in time today.
It's so much fun to come out like this and imagine that we're here. Let's stop here for a moment and look at something really interesting.
Yeah.
Now, Broadway at that time was the prime real estate where you wanted to live in New York City at
Right.
the time, because it's elevated above the rest of the town. And you can see when we look
Oh.
south, it goes downhill to the harbor.
That's a good point, yes.
And when we look west toward the Hudson River, it goes downhill once again.
And we would have seen the river right
We would have
here.
seen the river right there.
Yeah.
So if you lived here on the Broadway and a nice 2 or 3 story home, you would look all the way out to New Jersey, and this building is blocking our view, but you would also be able to see all the way to Brooklyn from here.
Oh, fascinating, because the houses
It's
were
so
pretty-
high.
Yeah.
And this goes drastically downhill on the other side of Broadway toward the East River. So all the homes up here were very, what do I want to say, high real estate value, right? And very high demand to live along this stretch of Broadway.
Including the former Captain Kidd lived nearby
Yes.
as well.
I just watched a great series on Netflix about pirates
Yeah.
in the Caribbean early 1700s.
Yeah.
Highly recommended to the audience.
Do they mention Kidd in the show?
It's after Kidd,
Okay.
but there is a pirate in the show. You know, it's based on real pirates. There is a pirate in the show who was at the execution of Captain Kidd.
Right.
And it very much affected him in his life. And he's one of the people you'll see in that series. It was very well done.
Fascinating. So check that out.
Pirates.
Aya Vlog says Mrs. Q is a lot of fun. Yes, she is. Were the French and Spanish here?
Yes, there was a
delegations?
French minister and there was a Spanish minister as well.
Right. And because there were sometimes Spanish sailors that would come here as well and stay for a few.
And some
Yeah.
of you who really, really are into the American Revolution might remember that they aided us,
Who?
right? The French and the Spanish helped
Oh.
us beat the British, whom they hated so much. So the French sent soldiers, right? Lafayette,
Yeah.
Rochambeau, Rochefontaine, and others, as well as a navy and money. And the Spanish sent money, and the Dutch sent money. And for
even the Dutch.
England, it was like a world war. All their enemies aided the colonies against them. So they all came to honor Washington. Lafayette was here for the inauguration, I should say, as he was a general under Washington's command.
And how about the Prussians that were involved in, especially in the military for the American Revolution?
Yes, General von Steuben was here for the inauguration.
Fascinating.
Do you know at the end of the Revolutionary War, Mr. Hamilton and Mr. Jay and a number of other New Yorkers were outraged that the government had no money
Yeah.
with which to pay General Baron von Steuben for his service.
Oh no.
He's,
And how was he repaid?
they granted him 40,000 acres of land in central New York State,
Okay.
which he could rent out, lease out as income. And that today we call Steubenville, although it should be Steubenville. But people up there call it Steubenville. And he is buried there.
Oh.
But they thought it was quite an outrage that the commander, who really was key in helping get our army together as a fighting force, didn't get paid in any way for his services. And that wasn't unusual.
Robert has another great question. We have a namesake on the bridge, Kosciuszko. Was he?
Kosciuszko,
Kosciuszko,
another
yeah.
officer, absolutely, who came to help us.
So wow, it was a very international audience, at
Because-
least in terms of Europeans.
Because everybody wanted to beat the British. In the Parliament at the dawn of the Revolutionary War, so say just before the shot heard round the world at Lexington and Concord,
Yeah.
some of the leaders of Parliament who called themselves Whigs, they were the opposition party at that time to the Tories, warned that a war with the colonies would be a global war, and that all of England's traditional rivals would help the colonies to
Right.
defeat England, and that they should not do it.
Yeah.
That they should not do it, that they could not win, that they would go bankrupt trying to do it. And that is pretty much what happened.
Well, England was bankrupt in the first place.
They are.
That's why they wanted to fight this war, or crack down on taxes.
Right, they had all that problem with the East India Company, and
Fascinating.
passed that Tea Act, right, that got us all very angry here, caused the tea to be destroyed, Boston to be embargoed, and those shots started the Revolutionary War.
Fascinating. And here we're approaching.
St. Paul's
Paul's.
Chapel. So we have now walked to the country.
Yeah.
We've now walked from the city to the country.
Now we're at the country. Yeah, because Wall Street would have been the dividing point.
And it didn't take us very long at all, did it?
No, not at all.
So this is the Country Church St. Paul's Chapel, and this is exactly how it looked for Washington's inaugural service.
And Gwen asked what's written on the sidewalk. Nothing related to the revolution. It's all afterwards.
Yes,
Yeah.
this is. Well, St. Paul's was here before the revolution.
Yes.
It was built in 1766, as I mentioned, as the Country Church
Right here. There we
for
go.
the town.
And here, of course, we have an obelisk, common Freemason symbol. And Maria says, wow, we're in the rural parts now. Indeed we are. So let's find out, before we continue with the tour, let's find out, can we find out what you gentlemen are wearing? People would love to know.
Also, we have some questions
Let
about
us know,
your
what's the
clothes.
name of the different types of dress that you have on?
Well, it's very simple. I have a wool jacket around, what is it, 1780, 1770, so somewhere from 1760s up to 70, late 70s, this type of collar. He's a little later, a nicer looking period collar that stands up instead of being down on that.
Right.
I'm more simple, not as frilly type of
How many layers?
I'm just one. Actually, it's very simple. It's kind of a light
Yeah.
wool for summer.
Oh,
Okay.
fascinating.
And I have linen here. I'm wearing linen.
And breechers.
And the breeches. The
Yeah.
breeches were like cloth. I'm not even too sure what kind of cloth. It's kind of a cotton herringbone texture. Wool stockings.
Oh, wool stockings.
Wool stockings. Okay.
Yeah.
And kind of that's it. I've been like what a gentleman looked.
And then for the hat.
Yeah, this is a cocked hat.
Okay.
Cock meaning cocked up. Remember, when tri-corners out this way, they got more stylish by cocking it up, making it come out that way.
Oh,
That's why it's called cock. So we're all wearing kind of cocked hats.
And no wigs for both of you.
Well, yeah, we're not supporting a wig, though. That would be a gentleman's thing. Is to have a
My
wig.
hair, if you don't know, I am here at the head of the line because I am President Washington. I was inaugurated. This day,
Excuse me
30th
for
of
not
April.
introducing the president.
Thank you, madam.
The president was at the beginning of the parade, which is why we didn't see him before, as we were at the end of the parade.
I don't wear a wig. I sport my hair in the style of a wig. Some of my other contemporaries, Mr. Adams wears a wig, Mr. Jefferson used to wear a wig, as did Mr. Franklin. So this would be my own hair. The suit I'm wearing is called a ditto suit. The word ditto means the same. I guess it would be equivalent to, in your world, a three-piece suit.
Right.
This is the style of 1789, the high-collared coat, the high-collared waistcoat, the shorter waistcoat. I have my fob pocket, of course, with my fob watch. I am wearing silk stockings. I am wearing my typical shoes that are buckled as well. I have buckles on my breeches. So basically, I have what's called small clothes, which is the breeches, which is the waistcoat. My main undergarment is my shirt, which also can be used as a nightshirt. That's my undergarment that I'm wearing before you.
Oh, fascinating.
And the hat I have, this is a gentleman's cocked hat. The ribbon on there represents the Federalist Party.
Yes.
So that's why those colors, black and white, happens to be on the cockade on my hat. And of course, I am a supporter of the Federalist system here in New York.
Fascinating. Thank you so much for running
Now,
down.
for those of you interested in clothing, there are some similarities between gentlemen's and ladies' clothes at the time.
Yes.
That also are a bit of an indication of class, and one of those are buckles.
So the buckles indicate class.
Shoe buckles and the breech buckles, the
As
design
opposed
of
to
the
over
buckles
here.
and how ornate they are.
Okay.
And often a lady's buckles were a gift to her when she accepted a marriage proposal from a gentleman, and that gentleman would then buy for her the finest buckles that he could afford. So Mrs.
fascinating.
Q, you see, has a fine pair of buckles because she's an established lady now.
Right.
But when she and Mr. Q were married, they would have been a more simple type of buckle. Also, the president mentioned his nightshirt or his linen shirt. As you can see, without being uncouth, I am wearing such a dress as well. Mine is called a chemise, but it's generally made of the same type of linen fabric and serves as my undergarment. It goes under my stays, you know, the things that are all laced up, holding everything together. And it also can serve as a nightshirt, as his does. So some similarities. And those are the clothing pieces that are the most often laundered. The ones that would be held closest to your body. So the ladies would be out washing those linens and getting them nice and white and clean.
And I have a few people asking, why do you have a cane?
Well, it's not a cane, it's a posing stick.
Okay.
I want to sit here, I'm conversing with someone for a long period of time. I want something nice to lean on.
Yes.
You're not going to be leaning against a wall like an uncouth person. You carry some sort of a walking stick. They come in all different sizes, shapes. This is an elegant gentleman's posing stick. As you can see, it has a brass tip on the top and on the bottom as well.
And has some very nice work around the top. Very nice workmanship.
Yeah.
Small things like that at the time are the things that people would have noticed
Right.
to identify class. The decorative element on his stick, as well as types of buckles and things like that. This would be a more working gentleman. Maybe he's an artisan. He may have a shop and be an artisan of some type. This is a gentleman.
And the brown suit, as you mentioned.
Yes.
That's what the color.
I wanted to make an appearance this day of the inauguration.
Yeah.
Originally, fine English wool was to be ordered for this suit. Till I read an article in the Hartford Courant newspaper from Connecticut. And there's a gentleman by the name of Mr. Wadsworth who had his woolen manufactory have an advertisement in there for fine English wool. Only the wool is manufactured here. So I had my good friend Henry Knox order 5 yards to make this suit. 'Cause I want to represent manufacturing in this country.
Of course.
A lot of people, my contemporaries from Virginia, they're more interested in the agricultural, they're more interested in farming, as is Mr. Jefferson and Mr. Patrick
That's
Henry,
hilarious.
Mr.
We used to have on tights.
Madison as well. I am interested in those, yes. I am a plantation owner. I own 5 separate farms. Farming is very important to me. But also manufacturing. We can manufacture goods here in North America, in this new country. And I want to make an example to show people, yes, it can be done here and it can be done well.
Fascinating. Yeah, I love that.
Now, this is the rear of the church, and this is not the way the president entered for his service. So how about if we walk around to the front of the church where the president did enter, and we'll talk a little bit about the pastor who officiated over that service, because he has a very interesting story.
Let's do it, yeah.
As I mentioned on a couple of these other live broadcasts, I've begun to understand why the ladies did not walk anywhere, why they were escorted.
Especially on a windy day.
Oh my goodness. And I'll tell you a secret, I am
Yeah.
cheating and I'm wearing tights under here. The ladies at that time did not wear underwear.
As Field says, anyone else worried that Mrs. Q is going to fly away?
Oh my goodness.
Well, luckily you have the strap with your hat underneath.
Well,
Oh,
it is
nice.
so much fun to be dressed up like this, I have to
Right.
say. Making this outfit was a great project, and I feel like I'm in a Cinderella fairy tale in it. And wearing the ladies' clothes of the 18th century really sort of transforms you into a different type of lady.
Right.
Just wearing the clothes makes you feel so elegant and so feminine, and the stays make your figure nice, and it just makes you feel so beautiful.
And now, why would the front of the church be facing the water as opposed to Broadway?
Well, Ariel, show them where the water was then.
Would have been right over here, right where the Oculus is
Yes,
located.
so
Yeah.
that was the shore. So if you were coming to the country church, yes, that's all landfill from that row of trees out. So that would have been the Hudson River. If you were coming to your country home, from your country home, you probably didn't want to come along the ugly Broadway, but would rather come along the Shore Road, or the Greenwich Road as it was called. And for those of you who know the West Village, Greenwich Street was the original shore of the island.
Oh, I
And
see.
that was a beautiful country shore road, so people preferred the Greenwich Road, or they preferred to take a boat and dock here and walk up from this direction. So they actually entered from this side of the church. And whoops, and this is the entrance.
Here it is.
And this is where the president was greeted that day. And if you visit Trinity Church, on the southern door, so if you're facing the church on the left, if you look at the doors there, you'll see a beautiful engraving of the president being greeted by the rector, Reverend Samuel Prévost. And Reverend Prévost has a wonderful story. He was a pastor when Trinity Church was the Church of England, and he was expelled from the church because of his rebel sentiments.
Oh no.
He kicked out of the church. They said he resigned. He was asked to leave his post in the church after the British burned the then capital called Esopus, which is Kingston today. He picked up arms. He joined the militia in the Hudson Valley and picked up arms against the British. After the war, when the church became the Episcopal Church of New York, the elders of the church, like John Jay, established him as the first post-Revolutionary War vicar of Trinity Church. So it was his pleasure that day, after the destruction of the war and all of the loss and suffering, to stand here and greet the nation's first president and officiate over that inaugural service. What a wonderful, evolution of his personal story, don't you think?
Yeah, beautiful.
From being expelled from the church to going to leading that very same church and welcoming the first president here. Prevoost, Prevoost. If you go on the Trinity Church website, that's trinitywallstreet.org, they have biographies of every vicar from 1697, from the first one.
And George Washington, the president, came over here to
have a service.
prayer.
So, yep,
Yeah.
he went in and they went inside. If you go to the Patriot Tours Facebook page, I believe I posted a picture of the doors and then illustrations of what the service looked like. Or no, my modern pictures of what it looks like inside. So you can see the representation on the brass doors, and then right next to it is a picture so that you can see that the entrance still looks exactly like this.
Fascinating. Let me show
And
you.
the altar still looks exactly as it did then.
Beautiful. And this is also known as the little chapel that stood.
Yes.
So, was the president a religious man?
I like to see myself, but I keep my religion very, very private.
Yeah.
I don't show it publicly. There were times during the war, even after the war, visiting around the country, visiting numerous states. If there wasn't a denomination that I formally belonged to, which I don't, although I do provide for Cohick Church near my home, Mount Vernon. So I do give them funds, and there's another church in Alexandria as well that I give funds towards it as too. So wherever I happen to be, there's a house of worship there. I may attend their service.
And how long were you here during the inauguration parade?
The service, it
was a full service.
It was a full service.
Ah, fascinating.
At least close to 2 hours spending here. There's actually the seat inside that has the seal of the United States, the eagle in there along the wall as well. If the gates are, of course, and the doors are open, we'd be able to see that today.
Oh.
But I know there are pictures of it virtually somewhere floating about.
Oh, fascinating, fascinating.
I'm sure it's been a very busy day for you, from the parade from your home at Cherry Street to Federal Hall, your greeting, your inauguration, your address to the joint houses of Congress, and now the service, a very long day.
And where does the parade end?
Right here.
Oh, right here. This
Right
is where.
here.
Oh.
I end up having dinner alone at 9 p.m.
Okay.
At the presidential mansion. Most people don't realize my wife, Patsy, of course, you know her as Martha. Patsy is her nickname. Patsy doesn't arrive till the 6th of May with my 2 step-grandchildren. So she's not here yet, so I had a quiet evening. Although the evening, I may say, was quiet. There was a lot going on in the city here. Thousands of people in the streets, still at the late hours.
Still
There
linger
was
outside.
not one room to be found for people traveling as far as Rhode Island to watch this ceremony.
Wow.
Taverns were completely filled. There was no vacancies for anyone. There was grand illuminations going on, grand fireworks. Now, grand illuminations would have fanciful candle displays in your windows.
Yeah.
Some were powered by heat. There were these lanterns, and they had these pictures that magically turned from the heat, hung on a wire. Later on, they called these things magic lanterns, where they could project the images. A lot of them were images of myself, my profile. There was candles with wreaths in front of people's homes that said, "Long live President Washington." So you could say in some ways it was almost like, if you want to know what a coronation would look like in Europe at the time, this is the closest thing we're going to get to. I'm holding levees, parties on Tuesday afternoons and Thursday evenings for dignitaries. And I guess that's why a little bit later on, it probably irked Mr. Jefferson just a bit when he starts writing some scandalous sheets, but I'm going to leave that for another day and another subject.
Of course. And a lot of people are asking on the comments, food. What was George Washington, what was the president eating that day?
Well, there was a lot of seafood being served.
Yeah.
My steward, my chef, actually at my home, the presidential mansion, actually was Mr. Samuel Francis, who I kept on staff for a short period of time. He had excellent fare when I visited him previously, especially when I left New York on December 4th, 1783, 6 years earlier, not realizing I'm going to end up back here. And this grand city will end up being our very first capital. He was a very excellent cook. A lot of seafood. One of my favorite dishes I like that my wife Patsy makes is chicken fricassee. That's my favorite dish that she makes.
Fascinating.
And I never divert from my breakfast, which is you would call pancakes. We call them hoe cakes, sprinkled with honey and sugar.
And was your presidential mansion nearby?
It was. You could say it's close by.
Close, okay.
It's a little bit of a walk.
Yeah.
It existed along the river. I've been told there is another structure there, and there's a column there connects a bridge that connects to the Long Island, which has the village of Brookland in that part of Long Island.
Right. I love it. Mrs. Q, anything else you want to show us?
Well, of course, you know that since this is New York, New York has the finest of everything. So we had the finest chefs, the finest parties, the finest decor. And those of you who do follow me as Mrs. Q, excuse me, you know that I have an older sister who married very well in the area of Albany, Mrs. Van R., who married into an extremely wealthy family, and even she is here for the inauguration. So all of the finest, well-to-do families of our state are here, as well as from New Jersey and Connecticut. So to give you an idea of how important this event was, not only the regular people of the town are here, but all of the, what would you call them, finer landed gentry have come into the city. My sister rarely comes into the city, but for this, she is here and attending all of the fine balls and parties.
Oh, fascinating. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us today. Hope you have a wonderful presidency.
Thank you, sir.
And thank you for joining along as well. Mrs. Q, where can people find more of your work?
You can find me on Facebook at Patriot Tours NYC, also on YouTube at Patriot Tours NYC. You can donate to my work at paypal.me, Patriot Tours, or venmo.com, Patriot Tours NYC. And every day on Patreon at Mrs. Q NYC, I post a daily history story. And you don't have to be a patron to see them.
That's wonderful. Consider becoming a patron or go on a tour because it's absolutely worth it.
I'm starting up tours again, so on Saturdays I will be out in costume. I'll be out tomorrow.
That's wonderful.
Not like this, but I'll be out tomorrow in costume doing a tour.
So thank you everyone so much for watching. I'm Ariel, this is Urbanist, and keep on exploring everyone and keep being awesome.
Thank
Have
you.
a good day.
Yes, huzzah!
I usually do a wave goodbye, so Mrs. Q want to join me? Everyone else want to join me? Bye-bye, everyone.